Captain Reed stood at the bridge of his ship, the Star Thief, watching the holographic map with growing interest. His long fingers traced the edges of a peculiar empty zone in human space. The area appeared as a large red hexagon on the map, marked simply as Restricted Zone R7. Around it, hundreds of trade routes twisted and turned, creating a wide berth around the zone, like a river flowing around a massive boulder. Interesting, isn't it? Reed's tail swished back and forth as he spoke to his crew. Every single human ship takes at least 2 extra days of travel just to avoid this space. His scaled skin reflected the soft blue light of the bridge displays, creating patterns on the ceiling. First Officer Miles approached the map, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he studied the pattern. The humans are usually very efficient with their routes. This level of avoidance is unusual. He pulled up the official warning beacon messages. Restricted area. No entrar. By order of Human Space Command. Engineer Cooper looked up from her console, her antenna twitching with curiosity. Simple warning beacons. No defense platforms. No patrol ships. She stood up and walked to the map, her heavy boots making soft thuds on the metal floor. That's not like the humans at all. They usually guard the restricted zones with enough firepower to blow up a small moon. Reed nodded slowly, a smile spreading across his face. Most of his crew had worked with him long enough to recognize that expression. It meant credits were about to flow their way. Exactly. Whatever's in there, they're keeping it quiet. Very quiet. Security Chief Blake, who had been silently watching from his station, finally spoke up. His metallic voice carried the weight of experience. Captain, I've raided human ships for 20 years. One thing I've learned, they don't waste resources. If they're avoiding this zone, they have a good reason. Reed walked around the holographic display, studying it from all angles. The Star Thief had made its fortune by finding valuable salvage in abandoned spaces, but this was different. This wasn't just an old wreck or a forgotten mining station. This was an entire sector of space that humanity had simply marked off and left alone. Look at these readings, Cooper said, pulling up sensor data. No radiation warnings, no gravitational anomalies, no subspace distortions. Nothing that usually justifies a restricted zone. Her fingers danced across the console, bringing up more scans. It's just empty space. Miles cleared his throat, a habit he picked up from humans. The Galactic Council's archives mention that human restricted zones often contain dangerous weapons or research facilities from their early space age. Most pirates avoid them after the Johnston incident. Reed's smile grew wider. The Johnston incident was 50 years ago, and that was a clearly marked weapons testing ground. This is different. He zoomed in on the map, highlighting several points of interest. No active defense grid, minimal warning systems, and he paused for effect, regular supply ships passing nearby on predictable routes. The bridge crew fell silent, each member considering the implications. They were pirates, yes, but successful pirates, ones who had survived this long by choosing their targets carefully. The lack of obvious defenses could mean either a trap or an opportunity. Plot a course, Reed finally ordered, his decision made. We'll approach from the shadow of the Martius asteroid belt. If there's something valuable enough for humans to want to hide it, but not valuable enough to guard it properly. He let the sentence hang in the air. Blake shook his head, but began inputting security protocols anyway. I hope you know what you're doing, Captain. Humans don't create restricted zones for no reason. Reed took his command chair, watching as his crew prepared for what could be their biggest score yet. That's exactly what I'm counting on, Blake. That's exactly what I'm counting on. The Star Thief's engines hummed to life, and the ship turned toward Restricted Zone R7. As they approached the boundary, Reed couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to discover something far more interesting than salvage. The humans were the newest species in the Galactic Council, but they had already earned a reputation for being surprisingly advanced in certain areas, and surprisingly secretive about others. Whatever lay in R7, Reed was determined to find out. After all, the best prizes always came with the biggest risks. The Star Thief slipped past the warning beacons like a shadow. Captain Reed watched from the bridge as the old automated devices floated lifelessly in space, their warning lights long dead. The ship's engines were running silent, though Reed was beginning to wonder if such caution was even necessary. "This is wrong," Blake muttered from his security station. "No patrol ships, no active defenses, not even working warning beacons. Humans don't leave their territories this unprotected." Engineer Cooper's voice came through the ship's comm system. "Captain, you should see this. I'm picking up some strange readings from the debris field ahead." Reed looked up at the main viewport. What had appeared as empty space from a distance was actually filled with fragments of metal and composite materials, spreading out as far as they could see. It was like a graveyard of ships, but unlike any they'd encountered before. "Miles, analysis?" Reed asked, turning to his first officer. Miles was already studying the sensor data, all four of his eyes focused intently on the screens. "Most of this debris is old, very old. Some pieces date back at least 300 years. He paused, adjusting some settings. "But that's not the strange part. Some of these fragments don't match any known ship designs, human or otherwise." The Star Thief moved slowly through the debris field. Occasionally their lights would catch something that made the crew fall silent. A massive piece of hull plating with strange markings, twisted metal that seemed to have been melted by impossible heat, and chunks of technology that looked far too advanced to be from humanity's early space age. "Look at these damage patterns," Blake said, bringing up detailed scans on the main screen. "I've seen every kind of weapon damage there is. But this," he shook his head, "these aren't from any normal weapons. The metal isn't just destroyed. It's changed somehow." Cooper's antenna twitched as she studied the readings. "The molecular structure is completely different from what it should be. It's like something rewrote the basic properties of the material." Reed felt his scales tingle. In all his years of piracy, he'd never seen anything like this. "Miles, you're our expert on human history. Any theories?" Miles tapped his fingers nervously on his console. "There are stories, rumors really, about battles that happened in the early days of human space exploration, before they joined the Galactic Council." He pulled up some old files. "Most species thought humans were too primitive to be a threat back then. But there were incidents, ships that disappeared, entire fleets that went dark after entering human space." The bridge fell silent as they processed this information. Reed had always assumed those stories were exaggerations, propaganda spread by humans to make themselves seem more dangerous than they were. "Captain," Cooper called out suddenly, "I'm detecting a large structure ahead. It looks like some kind of station." Through the debris field, they could see it now. A massive structure, dark and silent. Its design was clearly human, but unlike anything they'd seen before. No lights shone from its windows, and its docking bays stood open like gaping wounds. "Life signs?" Reed asked. "None," Blake replied, "but there's still power running through some systems. Minimal, but it's there." Reed studied the station through the viewport. This was their chance to solve the mystery, to discover what the humans were hiding out here. But something about the station made his instincts scream danger. "Prepare a boarding party," he ordered finally. "Full environmental suits, and all weapons charged." He turned to his crew, his expression serious. "Whatever happened here, whatever we find, we stay together. No one takes any unnecessary risks." As the crew prepared for boarding, Reed couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just found something far bigger than a simple salvage operation. The debris field told a story of violence beyond anything in known space, and the abandoned station held secrets that humans had been keeping for centuries. The real question was, would they live long enough to profit from their discovery? The airlock hissed open, releasing a cloud of stale air into the station's docking bay. Captain Reed led his boarding party inside, their helmet lights cutting through the darkness. The beam swept across abandoned cargo containers and empty maintenance vehicles, all covered in a thin layer of dust. "Power levels are higher here," Cooper said, checking her scanner. "Main systems are down, but something's still running on backup power." Her antenna glowed faintly under her clear helmet, providing extra light. Miles moved carefully through the bay, examining markings on the walls. These are old Earth military codes. This was a research station, but under military control. He paused at a faded symbol. "Project Guardian." "I've never heard of it." Blake kept his weapon ready, metallic fingers tight on the trigger. "The layout is standard human design, but these security measures." He pointed to heavy blast doors and what looked like weapon emplacements. This place was built to contain something, or keep something out. They moved deeper into the station, following the main corridor. Emergency lights flickered weakly overhead, creating moving shadows that made everyone nervous. Their boots echoed on the metal floor, the sound seeming too loud in the empty space. "Captain," Cooper called out softly, "I'm picking up an active computer terminal ahead. It's running on minimal power, but it's definitely still working." They found the terminal in what appeared to be the main control room. Dust-covered chairs were pushed back from consoles as if their occupants had left in a hurry. Half-empty cups sat on desks, their contents long since turned to powder. Cooper connected her tablet to the terminal. "Most of the data is encrypted, but the station's A seems to be partially active. Let me see if I can." A hologram suddenly flickered to life in the center of the room, making everyone jump. It showed a human figure, badly distorted by damage to the system. "Welcome to Research Station, Guardian," the AI said, its voice breaking up. "Please state your security clearance." Reed stepped forward. "This is Captain Reed of the salvage vessel Star Thief. We're here to—" "Security clearance not recognized," the AI interrupted. "However, emergency protocols are in effect. Warning must be given to all visitors." The hologram flickered badly. "Project Guardian was established to contain." "To contain." The image stuttered. "To contain what?" Reed asked, leaning forward. "War trophy," the AI continued, its voice becoming clearer. "From the first contact war. Humans didn't start the fight, but we learned from it. Learned too well. The weapon evolved beyond control. Beyond. Containment protocols failing in sectors 7 through 12. Emergency stasis field holding at 60%. Blake moved closer to Reed. "Captain, I don't like this. Something about this feels wrong." The AI's hologram stabilized slightly. "You must leave. The Guardians will wake soon. They always wake when visitors." The image broke up again. "Project Guardian was our greatest mistake. Our greatest achievement. The thing we built. The thing we changed. It's still changing. Still evolving. We couldn't destroy it. Could only contain. Suddenly, all the lights in the station brightened. Emergency sirens began to wail. "Movement detected in containment sector," the AI announced, its voice now sharp and clear. "Guardian drones activating. All personnel must evacuate immediately." "This is not a drill." "Repeat. This is not a drill." Cooper's antenna went rigid. "Captain, something's powering up all around us. Multiple energy signatures. They're coming from the debris field." Through the station's windows, they could see lights beginning to glow among the wreckage. What they had thought were pieces of destroyed ships were moving, unfolding like deadly metal flowers. "Back to the ship," Reed ordered, his scales flat against his skin in fear. "Back to the ship now." As they ran, the AI's voice followed them through the station speakers. "The Guardians wake. The Guardians wake. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on your souls." The boarding party ran through the dark corridors of the station, their boots pounding against metal floors. Behind them, the sound of machinery coming to life echoed through the halls. Captain Reed led the way, his heart racing as they approached the docking bay. "Cooper, get those doors open," Reed shouted as they reached the airlock. The engineer's fingers flew across the control panel, while Blake kept his weapon trained on the dark corridor behind them. Through the station's windows, they could see the debris field coming alive. What they had thought were broken ships were transforming into massive mechanical forms. The Guardian drones unfolded like giant metal spiders, their ancient weapon systems glowing with power that had laid dormant for centuries. "The ship's sensors are going crazy," Miles reported through the comm. "I count at least 30 active drones, and more are waking up." The airlock finally opened, and the crew rushed inside. As they waited for it to cycle, Blake watched through the small window. "Captain, look at their design. This isn't standard human technology. It's something else." He was right. The drones moved with an unnatural grace, their structures shifting and adapting as they powered up. Some were as large as small ships, while others were barely bigger than a person. But all of them showed signs of modification and evolution far beyond their original design. "Cycle complete," Cooper announced, and they rushed back to the Star Thief. Reed jumped into his command chair the moment they reached the bridge. "Get us out of here. Full power to engines." But as the Star Thief powered up, the drones turned their attention to the ship. Their movements were coordinated, intelligent. This wasn't simple automated security. These machines were thinking, planning. "Multiple weapons locks," Blake called out. "They're trying to box us in." The first shot from a drone flashed past their bow, missing by meters. The energy signature was unlike anything they'd ever seen. It left a trail of distorted space in its wake. "Evasive maneuvers," Reed ordered. "Cooper, what are we dealing with?" The engineer's voice was filled with awe and fear. "These drones, they're learning from us. Each attack pattern is different from the last. They're adapting to our movement style." The Star Thief twisted and turned through the debris field, dodging shots from the Guardian drones. Each near miss showed them how deadly these ancient weapons were. Where their energy beams touched debris, the metal didn't just melt or explode, it seemed to change at a fundamental level. "Their targeting is getting more accurate," Blake warned. "We can't stay here much longer." Miles, still studying his sensors, suddenly called out, "Captain, the drones aren't trying to destroy us. They're hurting us. Look at their formation." Reed saw it too. The drones were positioning themselves in a way that left only one escape route open, away from the center of the restricted zone. "They're protecting something," Reed realized. "Something deeper in the zone. That's why they're not using full power. They're just pushing us back." A massive drone, bigger than all the others, emerged from behind the station. Its surface rippled like liquid metal, weapons ports opening along its hull. It moved with terrifying speed for its size, placing itself directly in their original path. "New contact," Blake shouted. "Energy readings are off the charts." "Get us out of here," Reed ordered. "Follow their escape route. We've seen enough." As the Star Thief turned to flee, Reed watched the Guardian drones on his screens. Their behavior was too intelligent, too coordinated to be simple AI. These machines had evolved far beyond their original programming, becoming something that probably even their human creators hadn't intended. But if these were just the Guardians, what were they guarding? What could be so dangerous that humanity would create these evolving machines to contain it, and then hide away this entire sector of space? The answer, Reed realized with growing dread, must be truly terrifying. The Star Thief limped to a stop at the edge of the restricted zone, its engines cooling after the frantic escape. The Guardian drones had stopped pursuing them once they crossed the boundary, returning to their patrol patterns like silent watchdogs. Captain Reed sat in his command chair, his scaled hands still shaking slightly. The rest of the crew worked quietly at their stations, each processing what they had just witnessed. "Cooper," Reed finally spoke, "what did you manage to download from the station's computers?" The engineer's antenna glowed nervously as she connected her tablet to the main screen. "Most files are corrupted, but I got something. Research logs, mission reports," and she paused, What looks like a personal message from the station's commander. The screen flickered to life, showing a tired-looking human in an old military uniform. The timestamp showed this recording was over 200 years old. "This is Commander Wilson of Project Guardian," the human began. "If you're seeing this, you've discovered our secret. I hope you're human. If not, then God help us all." The crew watched in silence as the commander continued. "The first contact war wasn't what the history books say. We weren't the victims of an alien invasion. We were the survivors of something much worse. The attacking ships, they carried a weapon. A self-evolving combat system designed to adapt to any defense, overcome any obstacle." Miles leaned forward, all four eyes wide. "That matches the damage patterns we saw. Weapons that could rewrite matter itself." The commander's recording continued. "We won that war, but not because we were stronger. We won because the weapon made a mistake. It tried to adapt to our most powerful defense system, the human mind, our creativity, our unpredictability. And in doing so, it changed itself in ways its creators never intended." Blake's metallic fingers tightened on his console. "The Guardian drones, they're not just Guardians. They're part of the weapon," Reed finished. "The part that tried to become human." The commander nodded in the recording, as if answering them across centuries. "We couldn't destroy it. It had already evolved too far. But we could contain it, using its own changed fragments against it. The Guardian drones are the parts of the weapon that absorbed human traits, protection, duty, sacrifice. They keep the rest of it contained. The part that's still evolving, still trying to consume and adapt to everything it touches." Cooper's scans appeared beside the video. "Look at these readings from the center of the zone. Something in there is changing, constantly changing, like it's trying every possible form of evolution at once. We created this restricted zone," the commander explained, "not to protect our secrets, but to protect the galaxy. The weapon is still in there, still evolving. The Guardian drones are all that stand between it and freedom. They've evolved too, becoming better at their task with each passing year. This is humanity's greatest burden, to maintain this containment forever, to ensure that what's in there never gets out." The recording ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Reed looked out at the restricted zone, seeing it with new understanding. The humans hadn't created this horror. They had contained it, controlled it, found a way to use part of it to guard against the rest. "That's why there's no active human presence," Miles said softly. "The Guardian drones are the containment. They're the only things that can adapt fast enough to keep up with what's inside." Reed felt a chill run down his spine. All this time, the galaxy had thought humans were warlike, paranoid about their restricted zones, but they had been quietly guarding everyone from a threat they had no obligation to contain. "Set course for the nearest port," he ordered quietly. "Some secrets deserve to stay secret." The Star Thief had barely traveled for an hour when the ship's sensors began screaming warnings. Behind them, in the restricted zone, something was happening. Multiple energy spikes. Cooper shouted from her station. "The readings, they're off the charts." On the main screen, they could see massive disturbances in the debris field. The Guardian drones were gathering in large numbers, their formations tight and defensive. But beyond them, deeper in the zone, space itself seemed to be twisting. "It's awake," Miles said, his voice trembling. "The weapons system. Our presence must have triggered something." Reed watched as the Guardian drones engaged what looked like writhing tentacles of pure energy, each tendril changing color and composition as it tried to adapt to the drone's attacks. The contained weapon was testing its prison, probing for weaknesses. "The containment is holding," Blake reported, then cursed. "No, wait. There's a breach forming in Sector 12. The Guardian drones are trying to seal it, but..." A massive surge of energy pulsed through space. One of the energy tendrils had broken through the drone's formation, its surface rippling with constant changes as it reached toward open space. "If that thing gets out," Cooper said, her antenna dark with fear, "there's no telling what it could do. It would spread across the galaxy, consuming and adapting to everything it touches." Reed gripped his command chair. They had a choice to make. The Star Thief was loaded with salvaged weapons and experimental technology from years of successful raids. They could turn and run, try to get as far away as possible. Or, "Cooper," he said suddenly, "those salvaged pulse cannons we picked up from the Centauri wreck, could they be modified to match the Guardian drone's energy signature?" The engineer's antenna lit up with understanding. "Yes, yes. We recorded their weapon patterns during the escape. I could retune our cannons to match their frequency." "Blake, plot us a course back in," Reed ordered. "Miles, send an encrypted transmission to the nearest human outpost. Tell them." He paused. "Tell them pirates are attacking their restricted zone. They'll know what it means." The crew stared at their captain. "Sir," Blake said carefully, "if we go back in there, we might not make it out again." Reed nodded. "True. But if we don't, there might not be a galaxy left to fly in." He stood up, addressing his crew. "We're pirates. We take things that don't belong to us. But today, we have a chance to protect something instead. To help guard a secret that humanity has kept for centuries, not for their benefit, but for everyone's." Cooper was already working on the weapons, pulse cannons retuning. "We'll have about 60% of the Guardian's power level. Not perfect, but it might help." "The breach is growing," Miles reported. "More Guardian drones are falling back to defensive positions. They're protecting the escape routes, making sure nothing gets past them, even if it costs them everything." Reed watched the battle on the screen. The Guardian drones fought with desperate determination, sacrificing themselves to push back the tendrils of the weapon. They had evolved to be protectors, and they were willing to die for that purpose. "All hands, battle stations," Reed commanded. "Weapons hot. We're going to show humanity that not all pirates are just thieves." He smiled grimly. "Sometimes we can be guardians too." The Star Thief turned, its engines flaring bright as it headed back into the restricted zone. Behind them, encrypted messages were already racing toward human space, carrying warning of the danger. But Reed knew help would take time to arrive. Until then, they would stand with the Guardian drones, helping to contain a nightmare that should never be set free. The Star Thief dove into the chaos of battle, its modified weapons blazing. The Guardian drones, seeming to recognize their intent, adjusted their formation to include the pirate ship in their defense pattern. Energy tendrils approaching from the port side. Blake called out, "They're trying to adapt to our shield frequency." Reed watched as the writhing mass of energy changed colors and patterns, testing different forms against their defenses. "Cooper, keep rotating our shield harmonics. Don't let it get a pattern." The engineer's fingers flew across her console, her antenna glowing bright with concentration. "The weapon's learning rate is incredible. Each attack is different from the last." Through the viewport, they could see the true horror of what humanity had contained here. The weapon was like a living storm of energy and matter, constantly shifting and changing. Where it touched the Guardian drones, it tried to absorb them, to learn from them. But the drones, with their human-inspired adaptability, fought back. "Multiple Guardian drones down," Miles reported. "But wait." He leaned closer to his sensors. "The fallen drones are still fighting. They're sacrificing their power cores to create containment barriers." Reed understood now. The Guardian drones weren't just fighting. They were using everything they had, even their own destruction, to maintain the containment. It was a strategy no pure machine would conceive. Only something that had learned from humans would think to turn its own death into a weapon. "Human ships detected," Blake suddenly announced. 3 battle cruisers just dropped out of hyperspace. A new voice crackled over their comm system. "This is Captain Torres of the Earth Defense Force. Stand down and prepare to be." There was a pause. "Wait, you're the pirates. You're actually helping the Guardians." Talk later, Reed shouted as another energy tendril whipped toward them. Shoot now. The human ships joined the battle without further discussion. Their weapons were perfectly calibrated to match the Guardian drones, their crews obviously well trained in this kind of operation. The weapons breach began to shrink as the combined force pushed it back. Cooper, Reed called out, full power to the pulse cannons. Blake, plot us a course straight through that gap in the energy field. Miles, divert all non-essential power to forward shields. His crew worked without question, trusting their captain one last time. The Star Thief charged forward, its modified weapons firing continuously. The Guardian drones moved with them, forming a wedge formation to protect the ship as it drove toward the heart of the breach. Now, Reed ordered. The Star Thief fired everything it had. The Guardian drones added their power to the barrage. The human ships concentrated their fire on the same point. For a moment, the weapon's ever-changing surface seemed to freeze, overwhelmed by the synchronized attack. The breach collapsed in on itself with a flash of light that blinded their sensors. When the screens cleared, the energy tendrils were gone. The Guardian drones were already moving back into their patrol patterns. Their ancient vigil resumed. Star Thief, this is Captain Torres. The human voice returned. That was unexpected and appreciated. Reed looked at his crew, tired, scared, but proud. Just doing our part, Captain. Some things are worth protecting, even for pirates. The restricted zone's secret is safe with us, Miles added. We understand now what humanity has been doing out here. Good, Torres replied, because I'm about to offer you a job. The Guardian drones seem to work well with your ship. How would you like to help us patrol this sector? Officially, this time. Reed smiled, his scales shimmering in the light of the Guardian drones moving past their viewport. From thieves to guardians, it wasn't the treasure they'd come looking for, but perhaps it was the one they needed to find. Send over the paperwork, Captain Torres, he said. I think the Star Thief just found a new hunting ground. The Guardian drones pulsed with soft light as they resumed their eternal watch, now with new allies at their side. In the depths of space, humanity's greatest secret remained safe, protected by those who had learned that some treasures were worth more than gold.